Friday night. Your phone is silent. You open Instagram and see them co-workers at happy hour. Old college friends partying on a rooftop. Vague acquaintances laughing together as if they have been best friends since childhood. And you are sitting alone. Once again, you tell yourself you are okay with it. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice asks, "Is there something wrong with me? Here is what I want to tell you. Maybe there is nothing wrong at all." In fact, science suggests the exact opposite. Psychologist Robin Dunbar at University of Oxford spent decades studying friendship. And one of his most surprising discoveries was this: human beings can only maintain around 5 truly close friendships at any given time. Not 50, not 500, just 5. But here is the interesting part. His research also showed that people with smaller social circles often have deeper, more loyal, and more meaningful relationships than people with hundreds of acquaintances. And a study from the year 2020 at University of Michigan discovered something even more fascinating. People who feel out of place in ordinary social environments often score significantly higher in emotional intelligence, analytical thinking, and self-awareness. In other words, feeling like you do not belong somewhere is not necessarily a sign of weakness. Sometimes it is a sign of incompatibility. Today, we are going to examine 7 specific psychological traits that researchers found in people who tend to have smaller social circles. Not to tell you that you are more special than everyone else, but to help you understand exactly what is happening inside your psychology and, more importantly, what to do about it. Friday night. Your phone is silent. You open Instagram and see them co-workers at happy hour. Old college friends partying on a rooftop. Vague acquaintances laughing together as if they have been best friends since childhood. And you are sitting alone. Once again, you tell yourself you are okay with it. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice asks, "Is there something wrong with me? Here is what I want to tell you. Maybe there is nothing wrong at all." In fact, science suggests the exact opposite. Psychologist Robin Dunbar at University of Oxford spent decades studying friendship, and one of his most surprising discoveries was this: human beings can only maintain around 5 truly close friendships at any given time. Not 50, not 500, just 5. But here is the interesting part. His research also showed that people with smaller social circles often have deeper, more loyal, and more meaningful relationships than people with hundreds of acquaintances. And a study from the year 2020 at University of Michigan discovered something even more fascinating. People who feel out of place in ordinary social environments often score significantly higher in emotional intelligence, analytical thinking, and self-awareness. In other words, feeling like you do not belong somewhere is not necessarily a sign of weakness. Sometimes it is a sign of incompatibility. Today, we are going to examine 7 specific psychological traits that researchers found in people who tend to have smaller social circles. Not to tell you that you are more special than everyone else, but to help you understand exactly what is happening inside your psychology and, more importantly, what to do about it. Friday night. Your phone is silent. You open Instagram and see them, co-workers at happy hour. Old college friends partying on a rooftop. Vague acquaintances laughing together as if they have been best friends since childhood. And you are sitting alone. Once again, you tell yourself you are okay with it. But somewhere deep inside, a quiet voice asks, "Is there something wrong with me? Here is what I want to tell you. Maybe there is nothing wrong at all." In fact, Science suggests the exact opposite. Psychologist Robin Dunbar at University of Oxford spent decades studying friendship, and one of his most surprising discoveries was this: human beings can only maintain around 5 truly close friendships at any given time. Not 50, not 500, just 5. But here is the interesting part. His research also showed that people with smaller social circles often have deeper, more loyal, and more meaningful relationships than people with hundreds of acquaintances. And a study from the year 2020 at University of Michigan discovered something even more fascinating. People who feel out of place in ordinary social environments often score significantly higher in emotional intelligence, analytical thinking, and self-awareness. In other words, feeling like you do not belong somewhere is not necessarily a sign of weakness. Sometimes it is a sign of incompatibility. Today, we are going to examine 7 specific psychological traits that researchers found in people who tend to have smaller social circles, not to tell you that you are more special than everyone else, but to help you understand exactly what is happening inside your psychology and, more importantly, what to do about it. Trait 1: you are a natural lie detector. You are sitting with a friend. They smile and say, "I'm fine. Everything is good." But something does not match. Their voice is slightly flatter than usual. Their eyes look downward just a little too long. And you know, not think, but know that they are not telling the truth. You cannot explain why you know. You just do. This is not mystical intuition. This is science. Psychologist Paul Ekman, who spent more than 40 years studying facial expressions, discovered that human beings constantly display extremely small emotional signals that most people never notice. He called them micro-expressions, expressions that last only 1/25th of a second, appearing before the brain has time to control them. And he found that a small number of people can read these signals naturally, almost instinctively. He called them truth wizards. If you have always felt like you could read people without knowing why, you may be one of them. But here is the problem. When you can see through people, friendship becomes incredibly exhausting. Because most social interactions are built on mutually accepted small lies. "I'm fine. It's great to see you. We should hang out soon." These are not always malicious lies. They are social lubricants. They help people feel comfortable, but for you, every time you hear those phrases, your brain automatically analyzes them, real or fake. And when the answer keeps coming back as fake, you begin to withdraw. Not because you hate the person, but because sitting with someone while constantly detecting their dishonesty feels draining. For most people, a gathering is a conversation. For you, it is dozens of streams of information running simultaneously: words, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language. That is why you come home from social events feeling exhausted while other people feel refreshed. You do not dislike socializing. You are simply doing far heavier work inside it. But here is the important part. The thing most videos about this topic completely ignore. This trait can also become a trap. Not everyone who hides their emotions is untrustworthy. Sometimes people hide because they are protecting themselves. Sometimes they are not ready to share. Sometimes they are simply being polite. If you constantly interpret every imperfection as evidence of deception, you will push away genuinely good people, not because they are dishonest, but because you are misreading the signal. So what is the real skill here? It is not turning off your ability to read people. That is almost impossible. It is learning to pause before judging, learning to ask instead of conclude, instead of thinking, This person is fake. Try thinking. This person is hiding something, and I do not yet know why. That small difference between judgment and curiosity may be the line between walking alone forever and finally finding people who truly deserve your trust, because when you meet someone who is genuinely honest, someone whose outer signals perfectly match what is happening inside, you will know immediately. And that connection will feel deeper than any friendship most people could ever imagine. Trait 2: small talk causes real pain for you. Imagine this scene. You are at a party. Around you are laughter. Glasses clinking together. People happily chatting. Someone turns to you and asks, "Hey, how was your weekend?" And instantly, even though you do not want it to happen, a wave of exhaustion hits you. Not because you dislike the person, not because you are in a bad mood, but because the question feels empty. As if you are being asked to exchange meaningless words simply to fill the silence. You answer. You smile. You ask the question back. But inside, part of you is already counting down the minutes until you can go home. If this scene feels familiar, you are not alone. And more importantly, you are not strange. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, famous for his theory of flow, spent decades studying what makes human beings feel truly alive and fulfilled. And one of his most consistent discoveries was this: people with a high need for cognition, meaning people driven by ideas, deep questions, and understanding, do not simply prefer deeper conversations. They need them. The same way the body needs food. For these people, small talk is not merely boring. It can create genuine physiological discomfort, rising cortisol levels, restlessness, mental exhaustion. Meanwhile, a truly meaningful conversation about the meaning of life, about a crazy idea, about someone's deepest fear can leave them feeling more energized than any party ever could. This is one reason your social circle is small, not because you cannot socialize, but because you are unconsciously applying an incredibly strict filter and most people do not pass through it. Think about it this way: if you could only eat truly excellent food, you would reject many meals. Not because you are irrationally picky, but because your taste has been calibrated to a higher standard. You know the difference. And once you know the difference, you cannot pretend you do not. But here is where many people make a mistake. They begin treating small talk like the enemy. They avoid it completely. They walk into social gatherings with the attitude of, "I refuse to talk about meaningless things," and then wonder why people feel uncomfortable around them. The truth is that small talk is not your enemy. It is the doorway. No deep friendship begins with the question, "What do you think is the meaning of existence?" Most real friendships begin with small conversations about the weather, about work, about a movie, and gradually, through time and trust, they move deeper. Small talk is the first test. It is not the destination, it is the road leading toward the destination. So, instead of trying to avoid it, try seeing it differently. The next time someone asks, "How was your weekend?" do not simply answer the question. Use it like a doorway. Give a short answer, then ask something slightly deeper in return. You do not need to jump straight into philosophy, just go one layer deeper than the default. From "my weekend was good" to "I spent some time alone and realized I needed it more than I thought." Do you ever feel that way? That is the moment you find the real people. Not by skipping small talk, but by transforming it into a bridge towards something more genuine. Because the people you are searching for, the ones who can talk with you until 3 in the morning about questions with no answers, they are also standing in those same parties, also answering boring questions, also waiting for someone to open that door. Trait 3: you cannot be controlled by group pressure. There is a situation that almost everyone has experienced. You are in a group. Everyone is agreeing about something, an opinion, a decision, a point of view, and you can clearly see that they are wrong, or at the very least, you do not agree, but nobody says anything different. Everyone nods along, and then all eyes turn toward you. Most people will nod along too, not because they truly agree, but because refusing to nod feels dangerous. Dangerous in a social sense, being seen differently, being excluded, being labeled difficult. But you cannot nod when you disagree. Not because you want to create conflict, but because inside your mind, pretending to agree feels like betrayal, not betrayal of other people, but betrayal of yourself. This is not a difficult personality. This is integrity. But integrity comes with a price. When you are constantly the only person in the room who disagrees, the only person asking why after everyone else has already accepted something, you begin to feel like an outsider. Not because you are truly strange, but because most social groups are held together by unspoken agreement. And when you repeatedly disrupt that agreement, the group slowly begins pushing you outward, not through words, but through subtle signals, fewer invitations, conversations growing shorter when you walk in, distance quietly forming, and you feel it, but you still cannot change, because for you, belonging to a group that requires you to agree with things you do not believe is not belonging at all. It is losing yourself. But here is something I want you to think about. There is a massive difference between two kinds of nonconformists. The first kind disagrees because they genuinely think independently. They listen. They analyze. And sometimes their conclusion differs from the group, not because they want to be different, but because it is their honest conclusion. The second kind disagrees because they instinctively resist any opinion that is not their own. They are not truly thinking independently, they are simply reacting. And here is the subtle part from the outside. These two people can look identical, but internally, they are completely different. If you find yourself disagreeing with people, often honestly ask yourself, am I truly thinking, or am I merely reacting? Because genuine independent thinking will sometimes lead you to agree with the crowd. And if you never agree with anyone, that is not a sign of independence. It is a sign of an ego trying to protect itself. But if you are the first type, someone who genuinely thinks independently, then this is what you need to hear. You will never fit into every group, and you do not need to. But there are people, not many, but they exist, who do not want you to nod along. People who genuinely want to hear what you actually think. People who feel more alive when they are challenged, instead of simply validated. Those people are your tribe, and you will not find them by learning how to nod more often. You will find them by continuing to be yourself long enough and patiently enough for the right people to recognize it and feel drawn toward it. Trait for you are building something, and it is consuming all of you. People often think loneliness is emptiness, but there is another kind of loneliness, the kind that is completely full of an inner calling, full of something being born in silence. The greatest people in history all knew this kind of loneliness. Before Michelangelo completed the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, He spent years lying on his back, alone in darkness, with nothing but his brush and his vision, before Isaac Newton wrote the laws of motion that changed the world. He withdrew almost completely from society for nearly 2 years, not because they hated people, but because they heard a calling nobody else could hear, and they understood that answering that calling required all of them. You hear that calling too. Maybe you do not call it a calling. Maybe you call it a project, a goal, the thing I need to finish. But the essence is the same, an inner pull that cannot be explained, cannot be turned off, only followed or betrayed. And when you follow it, when you stay home instead of going to the party, when you say no instead of yes, when you choose the work instead of comfort, the people around you do not understand. They call you distant, cold, arrogant. They say you think you are better than everyone else, but the truth is that you do not think you are better than anyone. You are simply listening to something they cannot hear. In many spiritual traditions, this stage is called the dark night of the soul, a period when a person withdraws from the outer world in order to confront the inner one, not because they are abandoning life, but because they are preparing for a deeper version of it. Here is what very few people tell you. Real transformation does not happen in crowds. It happens in silence, in unseen moments, alone. In the darkness before the first light of dawn appears, a caterpillar does not become a butterfly by going out more often. It becomes a butterfly by completely dissolving in darkness, destroying everything it once was in order to become what it was born to be. You are inside your cocoon, and to people who cannot see what is happening within, a cocoon always looks like disappearance. But this is where I want you to be truly honest with yourself, because there are 2 kinds of people who retreat into darkness. The first kind retreats in order to build. They hear a real calling, and they are answering it. Every day inside that silence, they are becoming clearer, deeper, stronger. The second kind retreats. In order to escape, they use, I am working on myself as a shield to avoid facing the fear of connection, the fear of rejection, the fear of truly being seen. From the outside, these 2 people look identical. Both stay home. Both say no. Both appear distant. But internally, they are completely different. So the question is not whether you are lonely. The question is, what is your loneliness creating? After all those hours spent alone, who are you becoming? What are you building? Or are you simply standing still in the darkness, waiting without even knowing what you are waiting for? Because a cocoon only has meaning if wings eventually emerge. And wings only come to people who use their time in darkness to genuinely transform, not to escape, but to return to the deepest version of themselves. When you finally emerge from that cocoon, the world may not recognize you, but you will recognize yourself. And that is the moment real connections begin, not because you need other people to fill an emptiness, but because you have become whole enough to truly give. Trait 5. Your presence forces other people to look at themselves. There are people who walk into a room and make the entire room light up. And then there are people who walk into a room and suddenly the entire room becomes uneasy. Not because they did anything wrong, not because they said something offensive. Sometimes they have not even opened their mouth yet. But their presence creates something in the air, an unspoken tension, a nameless discomfort that everyone in the room can feel, even if nobody can explain it. If you have ever experienced this, if you have ever walked into a room and felt the atmosphere subtly shift around you, then you know how strange and lonely that feeling can be. But here is what is really happening. Carl Jung, one of the deepest thinkers in human psychology, had a concept called the shadow. He described it this way: every one of us carries a part of ourselves we do not want to acknowledge. The fears we bury, the weaknesses we refuse to face, the parts of ourselves we feel ashamed of. We do not eliminate those parts. We simply push them into darkness so deeply that we almost forget they exist. Almost. Because when we meet someone who is genuinely calm within themselves, someone who does not need external approval to feel valuable, someone who is not wearing a mask, the shadow inside us wakes up. Not because that person is doing anything, but because their existence becomes a mirror. And inside that mirror, we suddenly see everything we have refused to confront about ourselves. The person who depends on approval when they meet you, someone who does not seem to need it, they do not truly see you. They see their own dependence reflected back at them. The person living a life that does not belong to them when they meet you, someone following an inner calling, they do not truly see you. They see every choice they were too afraid to make. The person pretending to be happy when they meet you, someone who is not pretending, they do not truly see you. They see the emptiness they have spent their entire life trying to hide. And here is the most important part. Human beings do not handle seeing their shadow very well. It hurts. It is frightening. It demands a level of courage most people are not prepared to have. So instead of facing the mirror, they do something easier. They break it. They call you arrogant. They say you think you are better than everyone else. They create a story in which you are the problem, because if the problem is you, then they never have to look at themselves. This is why the people with the fewest friends are sometimes the people who trigger the strongest reactions, not because they are doing anything wrong, but because their existence asks questions the people around them do not want to answer. But I want to tell you something, and I want you to truly hear it. Being a mirror is not always a good thing if you do not understand what you are doing. There is a difference between someone who naturally becomes a mirror because they genuinely live with honesty and self-awareness, and someone who becomes a mirror because they are silently judging everyone around them. The energy of these two people feels completely different. The first person creates discomfort, but also safety. People feel like they can genuinely be themselves around that person, even if it feels frightening. The second person creates discomfort, and nothing except discomfort. Nobody wants to stay near someone who makes them feel watched and judged every second. So the question is not why people feel uneasy around you. The question is, where is that uneasiness coming from? Is it coming from the fact that you genuinely live in honesty, or is it coming from something inside you that is silently telling everyone else they are not good enough? Because if it is the first thing, if you truly are a mirror of honesty, then understand this: while most people run away from mirrors, a small number of people actively search for them. Those people are not afraid to look at themselves. Those people are searching for exactly what you are offering: unfiltered truth, connection without masks, and someone brave enough not to pretend. And when they find you, they will not leave. Trait 6. You are living in a time other people have not reached yet. There is a kind of loneliness that no word in English fully captures. The Portuguese language has a word, saudade, describing the longing for something that never existed or has not happened yet. A yearning for a future you can clearly see inside your mind, even though nobody else can see it yet. That is close to what you feel. You are sitting with people. They are talking about this week, about what happened yesterday, about weekend plans. And while your mouth is participating in the conversation, your mind is somewhere completely different, simulating scenarios for next year, for 10 years from now, connecting patterns other people have not noticed yet, worrying about consequences nobody else has even begun thinking about. You do not do this intentionally. Your brain simply cannot turn itself off. And this is where the real loneliness begins, not because nobody is beside you, but because you are living inside a different dimension of time than the people around you. In Buddhist philosophy, there is a concept called the beginner's mind, the state of seeing everything as if for the first time, unobstructed by what is already known. But you are the opposite. You do not see things as though they are beginning. You see them as if you already know how the story ends, while everyone else is still reading the first chapter. This is both a gift and a burden. The gift is that you notice things other people miss. You see opportunities before they become obvious. You see risks before they turn into disasters. You see patterns inside other people's lives that they themselves cannot recognize. And sometimes you want to grab their shoulders and say, "Look, you are walking toward the edge of a cliff," but the burden is that nobody wants to hear it. Not because they are stupid, but because the human brain is designed to prioritize what is directly in front of it. It is a survival mechanism, millions of years old. Focus on the threat happening right now, not the threat 10 years away. When you speak about distant futures, their minds cannot connect to it, not because they do not want to, but because they have not been programmed that way. So you stay silent. And inside that silence, distance begins to form. Not geographical distance, not distance created by circumstance, but perceptual distance, the distance between what you are living internally and what other people are capable of accessing. The prophets in ancient cultures were not isolated because they were cruel or difficult. They were isolated because they saw things ordinary people were not ready to face. And society, instead of listening, often chose the easier response, pushing them to the edges. You are not a prophet, but you understand the feeling, however, and this is what I want you to truly stop and think about. Seeing the future does not mean you are always right. There is an extremely subtle trap that people like you often fall into. When you have been correct many times, when you predicted something before it happened, you begin believing that your vision is absolute truth. You stop listening to other people not because they have nothing valuable to say, but because you have already decided that you know better. And this is where foresight transforms into arrogance. The difference between someone who is genuinely wise and someone who merely thinks they are wise is this: the truly wise person understands that the future is never completely predictable. They hold their vision with humility, like a compass, not a perfect map. Because sometimes the person living fully in the present, the person you assume is missing the larger picture, is actually seeing something you are too focused on the future to notice. The loneliness of living ahead of your time is real. But the solution is not forcing other people upward into your vision. The solution is learning how to build bridges between where you are standing and where they are standing. Not so you can lower yourself, but so they can gradually see what you see. Step by step. In a way their minds are able to receive. And when you finally find someone capable of standing beside you on that wall, someone also staring toward the same horizon, you will understand why you waited so long. Because that conversation, the conversation between two people looking toward the same future, is the kind of conversation that, once experienced, makes it impossible to return to anything less. Trait 7. You do not need other people to feel that you exist. There is a thought experiment I want you to try. Imagine that all social media disappears. No Instagram, no Facebook, no message. Nobody can see what you are doing. Nobody knows where you are. Nobody confirms that you exist. Would you still do what you are doing? Most people, if they are completely honest, would have to pause before answering that question, because a large part of what they do, the places they go, the things they wear, The opinions they express is shaped by an invisible question constantly running in the background. What will other people think? Not because they are shallow or bad people, but because this is how the human brain was shaped through millions of years of evolution. Group approval once meant survival. Being cast out from the tribe once meant death. The human brain learned to fear social rejection at a biological level so deeply that neuroscience research shows social exclusion activates many of the same brain regions associated with physical pain. But you are different. Not because rejection does not hurt you, but because that pain does not control you. You read because you need to know, not because you want to tell people that you have read. You build because you need to create, not because you want praise. You think your thoughts quietly, and they feel complete, even if nobody else ever knows you are thinking them. In psychology, this is called an autotelic personality, from the Greek words autos, meaning self, and telos, meaning purpose. People with autotelic personalities carry purpose within themselves. They do not need the external world to tell them that what they are doing matters, because they can already feel its value inside the action itself. It sounds almost like enlightenment. And in some ways, it is, but it also carries a very particular kind of loneliness. Because when you do not need other people in order to feel valuable, when you do not respond to the same emotional levers society uses to control most people, you become almost impossible for others to read. People compliment you, and you do not light up the way they expect. They ignore you, and you do not collapse the way they predicted. They invite you somewhere, and you can calmly decline without offering a long explanation. They threaten to exclude you, and you simply look back at them with a quiet expression. To ordinary people, this can feel almost impossible to understand. And what cannot be understood often creates fear. In many spiritual traditions, this state of non-attachment, the ability to act without needing external rewards, is considered one of the highest stages of inner development. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches Arjuna about nishkama karma, selfless action. Acting for the sake of the action itself, rather than for reward. In Zen Buddhism, this is called non-attachment freedom from the need for outcomes. You do not necessarily need to practice spirituality to possess this quality. Sometimes it is simply the way you were built. But this is where I want you to truly stop and think. Because not needing other people and being unable to receive love from other people are two completely different things. And the line separating them is thinner than you think. There are people who do not need validation because they have genuinely discovered an inner source of strength. They are free, not because they are closed off from the world, but because they approach the world from a place of fullness rather than emptiness. And then there are people who do not need validation because they have slowly learned how to stop feeling. They have been rejected enough times, hurt enough times, that their mind gradually shut down part of its ability to feel as a form of self-protection. They call it independence. But in reality, it is a wall built from wounds that never healed. The first person does not need connection in order to survive, but they are still capable of deep connection when they choose it. The second person believes they do not need connection, but in truth, they are simply afraid of it. So the real question is not whether you need other people. The real question is this: if the right person finally appeared, someone who genuinely understands you, someone who does not demand that you become someone else, would you be brave enough to open the door? Or has the wall become so thick that even the people who truly deserve entry can no longer step inside? Because this is the deepest paradox of people like you. You are the kind of person who needs connection the least, but when you truly connect, You are capable of creating the deepest kind of friendship a human being can experience. Not because you need someone else to complete you, but because you choose them fully freely. Fully consciously, not from fear of loneliness, but from the realization that your life becomes richer with them inside it. And the kind of friendship built upon that free choice, not upon need, not upon fear, not upon habit, is the rarest and most beautiful kind of friendship human beings can have. That is what you are waiting for, and it is worth waiting for. We have now gone through 7 traits. The lie detector, the person who cannot tolerate superficiality, the mind that refuses to be controlled, the architect inside the cocoon, the mirror others are afraid to look into, the person living in a time that has not arrived yet, and the soul that does not need validation in order to know it exists. But before this video ends, I want to tell you something that most videos about this subject never say. These traits do not make you more special than other people. They simply make you different. And difference is not a reward. It is not proof that you have won the social game. It is simply your nature, like the color of your eyes or the sound of your voice. Not better. Not worse. Just different. What I truly want you to carry with you after this video is not the comforting feeling that you are superior. I want you to carry a question. That question is, what am I doing with what I have? Because the ability to see through people, if it is not guided by compassion, only creates isolation. Depth of thought, if it is never shared, only creates silent arrogance. Vision about the future, if it is not used to build something meaningful, only creates chronic anxiety. Inner independence, if it is never opened at the right moment, only creates a wall nobody can cross. These traits are raw materials. They do not automatically become something beautiful. You have to do that yourself. And here is what I believe after everything we have talked about today. Your loneliness is not proof that you are broken, but it is also not proof that you are superior. It is simply where you are standing right now, a space between who you once were and who you are becoming. That space can become a prison, or it can become a laboratory. The difference is not your circumstances. The difference is the question you ask inside it. Not why does nobody understand me, but who am I becoming inside this silence? Not why do I belong nowhere, but what am I building so the right people can eventually find me? Not why am I different, but what am I doing with that difference? Psychologist Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and wrote one of the deepest books ever written about human meaning, once said something I think about every time I speak on this subject. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our happiness. The space he was talking about, the space between stimulus and response, is exactly where you are living. Wider than most people, deeper than most people, and sometimes lonelier than most people. But inside that space also lives everything you are capable of becoming. So do not rush to fill it. Do not rush to fill silence with noise. Do not rush to fill loneliness with the wrong connections. Do not rush to fill emptiness with anything simply to avoid sitting inside it. Sit inside it. Learning how to sit with yourself without fear, that is one of the rarest skills a human being can possess. And once you master it, you will realize that loneliness taught you something no relationship ever could, that you are whole even when nobody sees you, that you have value even when nobody validates you, that you are yourself even when nobody reflects you back to yourself. And when you know that, truly know it, not just hear it, a nod along the right people will arrive. Not because you desperately searched for them, but because you became the kind of person they cannot help but be drawn toward. The empty chair in front of you is not evidence of failure. It is being reserved, and the people worthy of sitting there are already on their way. They simply arrive only for those patient enough not to fill the seat with the wrong person.